Hello again. Chapter 7 Fire, Fire, 1960.
Bunty begins the chapter by bemoaning her loss for Gillian and, unbeknownst to the reader, Pearl as well. She continuously worries about Ruby and Patricia, and Atkinson gives us many tips on what will cause the fire, which we already know will happen, because Ruby has told us. When the fire does happen, Ruby and Patricia are traumatized by all the dead and burnt pets in the fire.
Characterization.
At the doctor's, Ruby set about increasing my word power, although she still feels powerful when she's given access to language. Ruby still shows signs of compassion in this chapter, despite her earlier show of disregard for Gillian's death. She says, "How can time be reversible when it gallops forward, clippity-clop, and nobody ever comes back? Do they?" On the surface she's mourning Gillian, but perhaps there's also a hint of mourning for Pearl as well, who does come back metaphorically, but in her memories.
George can be so confrontational he would swear black was white for the sake of an argument. Bunty would go further, claiming it wasn't colour at all, but a piece of furniture or a banana. Bunty is also soaked in grief and tranquilizers after the death of Gillian and Pearl, traumatized by these deaths. However, while she's consumed with worry about Ruby and Patricia's safety, she's still as irritable as ever and no kinder to them or fonder of them. Our poor mother can't bear us out of her sight, can't bear us in it. Patricia gets even more depressed in this chapter, claiming to have a sickness of the soul, just for attention, which she says in hollow, gothic tones, closing her eyes and putting on the kind of sublimely bored expression that the pre-Raphaelites were always demanding of their models. Literary techniques. Ruby capitalizes the after Gillian era, 1960 AG, to represent how Gillian's death has changed the family, much like Jesus has changed the world of religion. However, ironically, Gillian's death does not affect Ruby much, and it's Pearl that has a lasting impact.
Ruby satirizes religion and points out several flaws in the religious psyche, saying about the Lamb of God, although he is meek and mild, he is also, inexplicably, part of the trio that can consign you to the inferno, also making reference to the reverence of the religious people, mocking, "I swear you can hear the capital letters when Kathleen talks." Ruby says the red horseman of the apocalypse is already galloping up the stairs of the shop, using the horseman as a metaphor for the fire and continuing the chapter's frequent use of religious themes, which symbolise an escape for Ruby after Gillian's death. However, it is not successful, with the fire possibly making her realise the futility of religion, being the fires of hell and showing the negative side of her newfound beliefs. Ruby also says that her and Patricia, look like the Lone Ranger. In different circumstances, this could have been fun during the fire. Patricia swings herself off the windowsill and over the drainpipe in a very Robin Hood kind of way. These are both examples of bathos.
When Patricia won't come downstairs, she is reading Marcel Proust's In Search of Lost Time, and later Ruby says, "No lime to Seine and Madeleine for us in future years," but it was amazing what the smell of burnt frying sausage could achieve, referencing the Madeleine in the book, and the deaths of all the animals in the shop.
Ruby has to prompt Bunty, who is soaked in grief and tranquilizers, to leave the doctor's waiting room, and she follows like a little lamb. This foreshadows the final chapter when Ruby takes care of Bunty when she has Alzheimer's, and their role of mother and daughter are reversed. Ruby also warns the reader that the fire is approaching, saying, "And as for spontaneous combustion, that's just waiting to happen," detailing various symptoms of the house that could cause the pet shop fire, which has, much like Gillian's death, already been revealed to the reader before it happens. Atkinson builds tension for the fire, mentioning the paraffin heater, the meal, sausage, egg and chips, a health and safety nightmare of a meal for a woman in her chemically sedated state. Atkinson also tells us, of course Bunty wasn't to know that the thermostat wasn't working properly. Bunty has had enough, a feeling shared by Alice and Ruby at different points in the book. Ruby wonders, is Gillian only counterfeiting death? Is she really just asleep and proving very hard to wake up? This echoes Albert not believing in death from earlier in the novel. also Ada not believing that Alice is dead because she hasn't seen a corpse. Unlike in those instances, Ruby is wrong for not believing Gillian's dead. Themes.
Ruby attempts to brighten up the desolation of Gillian's death by describing Patricia's flying saucer skirt, attempting to make a bleak tone more colourful, thus showing her strange attitude towards death. Ruby also takes confidence in religion for comfort, and says, "I pray so much, desperate, attention-seeking prayers to the Lamb, that I develop sore knees."
Patricia says, well, she wasn't, was she? When Ruby suggests that Gillian's gravestone should say, beloved sister. This echoes Bunty's death and Ruby's similar reaction at the end of the novel, and Atkinson leaps straight from the colourful depiction of Patricia's flying saucer skirt to the tragic, come back, Gillian, all is forgiven, come back, and we'll make you our beloved sister. The all is forgiven could link to Gillian framing for Ruby for manslaughter, the killing of Pearl. However, Ruby experienced a brief moment of connection with Bunty later in the chapter, who pulls me toward her, wrapping me in the shelter of her dressing-gowned arms, and for once the invisible cord between us shrivels and shurs to nothing as we bridge the 3-foot chasm. This is perhaps the only moment of the companionship between Bunty and Ruby, other than the moment when she discovers Pearl's existence. After the fire, the family is not quite so plagued by the death of Gillian. Ruby describes it as a purification, an ordeal that we survived and which allowed us some change and renewal. Both Ruby and the wife of Bath are very dedicated to Christianity, but they both nevertheless criticise it and point out its many flaws. Ruby calls God the blood-stained, smoke-damaged lamb, bemoaning its violence, whilst the wife criticises God for only giving women powers of deceit, whipping, spinning, while men get physical power and masculine authority. While not quite so affecting to Pip as the fire is to Ruby, old Orlick's threatening of Pip near the end of Great Expectations, and thus his near-death experience, gives Pip the vital energy and life force he needs to help the convict escape, and arguably read some of the brooding feeling regarding his loss of fortune.